decided to expand when we were a single office. We were only 5 agents short of being the largest single office location in the world. There's one out of Alaska that had like 143, and we were like at 138 or something like that. So anyway, pretty cool. So that's what's going on at RE/MAX. What else is going on at RE/MAX is Mr. Paul Baker. Get political on me. Very cool, Paul. So stand up and tell me what you're doing.
Well, I jokingly say it's in my DNA because my father was a pharmacist, but he was also a city councilman and on the library board and the county clerk and all these other things. And I saw as a young man what it did for him and his career. And so as most of you know, I'm on the Boys and Girls Club Board of Directors. This is my 2nd year. And I threw my hat in the ring for the Scottsdale Board of Realtors. And it was announced yesterday that I'm on the board for 2 years. So. I feel like a company as powerful as ours should always have representation. My good pals Ed and Luann Gunkel had done their service, and they've always been unofficial mentors to me. And so thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Baker for president. Baker for president.
Hey, we're well on our way. We're about 67% on our breast cancer awareness campaign. So just, if you got a couple extra bucks and you can help out breast cancer awareness. Did you know every 30 seconds a woman dies of breast cancer? It's absolutely crazy. So Bethany, you're doing a great job there. Our blanket drive for the dogs, right?
Yeah, it went really well.
Yeah, I mean, just what a great effort you're doing in philanthropy. So we certainly appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay, Conference Room 1, mobile vaccination clinic will be here on November 11th. The reason why we do that, what, is it the 12th?
They're going to be here on Friday.
Oh, this Friday.
Yeah,
Is that?
from 11 to 1.
Got it, all right. Okay, all right, so thank you. All right, so the reason why we do that, man, is like my daughter is at U of A and everybody on the campus is sick. Everybody's different about vaccines, whatever your culture is and whatever that looks like. I think that because we get together as a herd often, it's good to get vaccinated, whatever you guys want to do with that. Like I know my Blue Cross Blue Shield, it's free for me. So anyway, the vaccinations will be in the building. We're trying to make it easy for you. No need to make an appointment. All right. Birthday Friday. Don't miss it. We're going to have a food truck, live music, and a costume contest. That's the last Friday of this month. So very, very fun. Thanks for coordinating all that, Bethany. Sponsored by CNN Mortgage. Are they in the house? All right. Yeah, thank you guys for that. Very fun. Adopt-a-thon. Animal rescue for our main office, November 4th. Anyone it's going to be kind of cool. They're going to have pets at the front office. So if you know anybody that's interested in taking on a dog, one of the coolest things is when you meet a really cool dog and you're talking to the person and they say, "Oh yeah, it's a rescue." It makes it even more like, it's.
What day is that?
That is, thanks Don, November 4th.
I'm sending my wife out of town.
We are not having cats. It's just dogs.
Yeah. All right. New agents. Do we have a new agent list?
I thought it was on there.
Oh, we do. All right. Here we go. Andrew Burns isn't here. Is Anna Conceza in here? Hopefully, looks like I gave that a bloodbath. Jennifer's not here. I didn't see her. Christine Espinoza. She was at the last meeting. Oh,
She's in the back.
is this? Oh, stand up and introduce yourself.
That's Amanda.
Amanda, welcome.
Hi, Amanda Sue Briggs.
Well, you gotta say more than that. We're not gonna. Would this group let you off that easy?
I know. Hi, I'm Amanda Sue. I came over from Lawyer's Title. I'm Don's Chief Operating Officer. So,
All right,
thank
welcome.
you. Glad to be here.
I love the
Where
title.
else did you work before that?
Oh, and I worked at SAR, so
What'd you do there?
Director of Communications and Technology. You guys probably remember me from making the rounds at all the RMS meetings, doing the tech talks, talking about the new website, all of that. So that was me at SAR. Did a year at Lawyers, and now after 6 years, finally getting licensed. So, yes, thank you.
You probably should have never said the SAR thing.
I
Everybody's
know,
going to
I
be at Don's
know.
office.
I was the good person at SAR. So.
All right, and then Christine, I'm not going to let you off the hook. Stand up, introduce yourself, and tell us about you.
Christine Espinosa. I came over from RE/MAX
before that, Scottsdale Luxury Property before that. It's been 20 years for me, so I'm happy to be here now.
Is Catherine here, Don? Catherine Mata?
As a matter of fact, she's prospecting at the moment. She said that I'd come to the meeting except prospecting is the most important thing for me to do at this moment.
If you're not lead, if you're not lead generating, you can't lead follow-up, and you can't negotiate, you can't present. So, yeah, lead generation is important. I don't see anybody else that's joined us within the last 30 days that I might have missed. Okay?
All right. A little bit of housekeeping. I know everybody.
So this is kind of unscripted, but I want Antonio to tell everybody what you did last week.
But
Just put it, say like that.
so I went to Jamaica and we built 3 houses for people that were homeless. It was awesome. He was asking me about it. I go, yeah, our flight got delayed indefinitely, and we ended up taking the last minute. 31 of us all went out there.
And this is how many years have you been doing this now?
Since 2012.
So, thank you.
Yeah, it's not that expensive.
We know you didn't.
I want to give him a hand because he's the best broker there is in the business.
The best
Seriously.
thing about the trip was the bobsled. You guys tell us about the bobsled.
Oh, they have the Cool Runnings Cafe out there in the airport. So I took a picture inside the Jamaican bobsled. No, but seriously, I'm gonna take a second and just brag about Sandy. He is the best broker there is in the business. I've been doing this for 14 years, and he is the man. Just did a really difficult transaction where I really needed a broker, and he came through. He's the best
I got a bunch of questions and answers I'll put on the screen, but I've been reading something this week, and I didn't put on the screen because I don't know all the details. But I just want to encourage you. First of all, I can't sit because I hurt my back. So
What'd you do?
So
It's a long story.
Long story.
Can you talk about it?
whenever possible.
Can you talk about it?
Whenever possible, use the additional clause addendum provided to us by AAR. It was just a case that was settled where a real estate agent and company was found negligible for over $200,000 for writing a contingency that wasn't a completed contingency that caused the buyer harm. And they went to court and went to, even to an appellate court, I believe, and they were found guilty. Then they had to pay for attorney's fees. In that state, I believe they had their state form for these clauses, and they didn't use it. They wrote their own. So whenever possible, in all the clauses that we do, whether it's a tax deferred or non-refundable deposit, which we'll talk about a little bit today, if we have the form, use it. If we don't, then call me for verbiage. Because the agent wrote it, it wasn't complete, it wasn't detailed. The buyer bought a house, found out that something was not permitted, and it created a mess. But this real estate firm was found liable for $200,000. So whenever possible, please use the AAR form. That's what we're there for. So the biggest issue, we'll talk about it, one of the questions today, is when we make money non-refundable. So a lot of times I'm seeing on additional terms and conditions, it just says, after 10 days, the buyer's money is non-refundable. We laugh, but we see it. Either we're writing it or we're receiving it, and we're not really addressing it with detail. If this, then that. You got to be a little bit more specific. And it happens, and I've been telling a lot of you, 99 out of 100 times you're going to be okay. But I live in your 1% that you're not okay. Because no one ever calls me and says, hey, I had a great transaction, lender did on time, the inspection was great, buyer's agent cooperated, the listing agent was perfect, we closed up. No one ever calls me and says me that. And that's okay. That's okay, because I'll get a lot of phone calls. But I live in your 1% of problems, so I hear this all the time. So just, you gotta be a little bit more specific. All right, so here's today's first question. I don't know how many of these we'll get through, but we'll try. So, the listing agreement provides that an 8% commission for the purchase of the seller, and the buyer agree that the brokerage commission are to reduce from 8 to 7%. can the seller and the buyer in the purchase contract reduce the brokerage commission from 8 to 7%? No, but we do it. And when I say we, I'm not saying you specifically, but we as an industry, we do it. You can't put commissions in a purchase contract. They're not enforceable. We as agents are not a party to this transaction. So that's like saying, I'm doing a deal with Sonny, and Sonny agrees to reduce his commission from 3% to 1%. I can't hold him liable for that. And if he says, even if he agrees to do it and it's in the purchase contract, he's not signing the purchase contract, and he changes his mind at the end, I'm stuck. He doesn't have to accept that. Can you turn that off for a second? Sure.
You want the first one?
Yeah, that's okay.
Why is the buyer negotiating the commission with the seller?
Well, because sometimes they're reducing the commission to make a deal happen. Here's what's supposed to happen.
Isn't that a violation of the Code of Ethics?
Think of it as two separate contracts and two separate lines, okay? The purchase contract is between buyer and seller, and that's it. Buyer and seller have an agreement, whatever that agreement is. Then you have a separate contract between agents. The seller is contracting with a listing agent. The listing agent, through the MLS, is contracting with a buyer's broker. That's how we get paid. That's why we require an MLS in SkySlope. That's how we get paid. If agents are going to reduce the commission, it has to be on this line. I, as a buyer's broker, agreed to reduce my commission from 3% to 2%. And that stays with the agent line. It does not cross over to the purchase contract, because we as agents are not a party to the purchase contract.
Correct.
Make sense? So when you want to reduce a commission, you have every right to do so, but it has to stay on the outside the purchase contract. So the same thing if you're the listing agent. If you're going to reduce your commission, you already have an agreement with your seller of X% to sell it. You're just going to do an addendum or an amendment or an email just stating that I agree that, commission will reduce from 6% to 5%. That's your agreement with the seller. And if you're the listing agent and you're going to get it from the buyer, you need something in writing from the buyer stating that they're agreeing to reduce their commission from 3% to 2%. And if you want to go one step further, that reduction from the agent needs to be signed by their broker. Because the agent can say it all day long, but the broker has to approve it. I don't know any broker in town, at least with the major firms, that would not honor what their agent says, okay? But if you want to play it right by the line, you need to do that, and I didn't sign off on it. I would never not agree to do that if you guys agreed to it. And I don't know any other major brokerage in town that would say the same thing, okay? So just keep the two separate. If you're going to reduce commissions, keep it off the purchase contract, because we are not a party to the purchase contract. All right, make sense?
And the buyer and the seller still have to sign it, if it's an addendum.
No, it has nothing, commissions have nothing to do with buyers and sellers.
No
paperwork. No paperwork.
Just the title.
Well, he said addendum, so that's where I'm like,
An addendum,
Addendum is a contract.
an addendum is for the buyer and seller,
right.
or a notification or a separate agreement between the agents, if that's what you mean. Keep in mind, there's a difference between a notification and an addendum. An
Correct.
addendum has to be agreed to by buyer and seller, or whoever the two parties are. A notification is just a notification.
Addendum is add something to the contract. That's the definition of
Just
an
try to
addendum.
keep it out, we're doing a lot as an industry, and that's, like I said, it's perfectly fine.
Danny,
You see it in the purchase contract.
would a possible exception to that be if you're buying a place for yourself and you're,
But you're still acting as an agent.
right,
So
but you can put something about your commission in the purchase contract, like it's gonna be credited toward closing costs, or you're gonna.
I guess you could, but you still have to waive it with the listing agent. Because you're acting as, on the purchase contract, you're acting as a buyer, but on the other hand, you're also an agent,
Yeah.
right? So, can you do it? You can as a disclosure, sure, but you really need it on the other line to reduce your commission from the listing agent. Okay? Make sense, everybody? All right, so we kind of know that answer, right? No, you can't do it because the purchase contract is between buyer and seller, and it's not enforceable, and so on. All right. Natalie Grange, you paying attention? I'm picking on Natalie only because I just saw it this morning, that's all. The tenant is trying to rent a home for $1,500 per month. The tenant has bad credit. The tenant is offered to pay $6,000 at the time that the tenant moves into the home. The $6,000 would be 1 month's security deposit plus 3 months prepaid rent. Can the landlord enter into this lease agreement with the tenant?
No.
Okay, think about it. So those that say yes are saying it because, why?
Because they offered it.
Okay.
Voluntarily.
All right, and the people that are saying no are saying no because,
Unless it's not written on or can't have
It
it.
can only be 1.5 times.
don't confuse prepaid rent with security deposits. It's two separate things, and you're all right, but you have to be a little bit more specific. The rule is this. It doesn't make a difference if the landlord or the tenant agree. The tenant cannot pay more than 1.5 times the rent in deposits. The security deposits, there's 3 types of security deposits. There's the security deposit, there's a cleaning deposit, and a pet deposit. No matter what the rent is, those 3 total numbers cannot add up to more than 1.5 times the rent. So if the rent's $1,000, total deposits cannot be more than $1,500. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. On the next section, I should have made a copy of it, but on the next section on the lease agreement, there's fees, non-refundable fees. Fees are not deposits. And those numbers, those fees are not incorporated in deposits. So if the rent's $1,000, I can charge a $1,500 security deposit, I'm good. I could also charge a $500 pet fee and another $500 cleaning fee, because fees are not deposits. So the reality is, vernacularly, we say a non-refundable deposit, and there really is no such thing. Deposit is refundable, depending upon the condition of the house and so on at the termination of the lease. There's no such thing as a non-refundable deposit. It's a fee, a non-refundable fee. And those don't get charged into the total deposits. So far, so good? Okay, here's the next one. If a tenant, like this question, is gonna prepay rent, that's fine. And this gets tricky, because now this is all verbiage. The Tenant Landlord Act says that a landlord cannot demand prepaid rent in advance. So what does the word demand mean? Right? Here's how AAR incorporates it, interprets it. You can't ask, demand, suggest, require, ask, hint around. Demand encompasses everything. Because where's Eric? Where's Eric? We fight on words all the time, right?
We do.
The demand is demand. What does that mean? So demand you just can't ask in any form matter. However, a tenant can offer to prepay rent. So here's how the conversation goes. So Eric, your tenant, my landlord really wants to work with you guys, but your tenant has really bad credit, their income is kind of weak. He's just unsure if he really wants to make, rent to your tenant.
My tenant volunteers to pay 3 months rent up front.
Perfect. I can't say, do you think your tenant would volunteer to pay rent? I mean, you just can't do that. Does it happen? You bet it happens. So when we write a lease agreement, anytime there's prepaid rent, you must write into the lease agreement that the tenant has voluntarily agreed to prepay rent so. Because if it ever goes into a dispute, it's gonna be a he said, she said. You volunteered, Eric.
Yes,
No, I
I did.
didn't. You told me I had to. I did not. I mean, it's gonna come that way, and the landlord will lose every time. So if you're going to prepay rent, that's fine, but it has to be written into the initial terms that the tenant has voluntarily agreed to prepay rent. And there should be a little bit more further detail about what months those rents are to be applied to. It's probably not as particular, but you need to write the words that the tenant has voluntarily agreed. Okay? Make sense? So you've got deposits, 1.5 times, you have fees, which are not deposits, and prepaid rent. So it's kind of a trick question, everybody was right. I just wanted to clarify that.
Sandy, is there a cap on the fees?
Nope. Nope. There's no usury laws on fees. So the answer, right, it's just what we talked about. And this is interesting, in the bottom note, the voluntary language is amended because there's a lot of vacation rentals. All right, let's see, what do we have next? All right. The buyer and seller entered into an AAR residential resale and purchase contract for the purchase of real property. The buyer inspected the property and decided to cancel the contract. The buyer timely submitted the inspection to BINZR, but failed to include the items disapproved. We've talked about this a lot. However, the buyer submitted the BINZR by way of an email, and in the body of the email, identified the issues with the property and indicated that the buyer intended to cancel. So, in that same example, I'm sending Eric a Binzer and saying, Eric, based on the condition of the roof, my buyers are canceling, here's the Binzer. And in the Binzer, it just checks the box that says buyer elects to cancel. There's no reason why he's canceling. So the question is the Binzer valid?
No.
No.
It has to be on the Binzer.
Okay, so it has to be on the Binzer and so on, right? Okay, this is kind of an interesting one. And I will tell you, well, I'll get to this in a second. Here's the issue. The buyer is the buyer entitled to return the owner's money because the Binzer was not filled out correctly? And the answer is, the contract provides that if a buyer disapproves the items on the Binzer, shall deliver notice of the items disapproved and state that the buyer elects to immediately cancel the contract. Provides notice, wait, I'm looking for this. Here the buyer failed to properly comply with the terms of the Binzer by not listing the items disapproved, that's what we said. However, the buyer did provide an email to the seller during the inspection period indicating the defects with the property and stated their intent to cancel. This is deemed valid cancellation under the contract, and therefore the buyer is entitled to earnest money. And the reason is the buyer or the seller was put on notice, formed to do our business, but it doesn't have to be on a Binzer. The buyer did notify to the seller in writing his intent to cancel and why, and he was during his inspection period. So even though it wasn't on the Binzer, he was notified. There's another question we're going to talk about a little bit, where the seller learned something after the fact. In other words, you know what? We'll get to that. I'm sorry if I. Yeah, no, my back is just hurting. Okay. Any questions on this one? We've talked. Here's what we've talked about. We've talked about if the Binzer is not filled out correctly and you're the listing agent, and you know the buyer's going to cancel, but they didn't do it correctly. Let's take the same example where the Binzer, but there wasn't an email. It just said the Binzer said, I'm canceling the contract. We'll agree that there wasn't a proper cancellation. We also know that the buyer is going to cancel. So the issue that you want to think of the listing agent is, do we want to make this an issue now, or do you want to fight it? You know the buyer is going to cancel. So the issue is, do you want to make it an issue, or we'll just let it go? If you want to make an issue, then what AAR says is we have to issue the buyer a 3-day notice of cure saying that you didn't fill out the Binzer correctly. Then the buyer has 3 days to cancel the contract. If the buyer doesn't cancel in those 3 days, then the seller potentially can keep the earnest money.
No, and so the reason why we're spending so much time on this is Sandy and I and Greg had lunch yesterday. And basically, once you get a meeting of the minds on the contract, the Benzers, for some reason, the last 6 months have been painful getting them through with bids, and windows, and roofs, and air conditioning, and walkthrough. I mean, just a nightmare. It's a whole nother realm of negotiations.
Well, we've always said from when the warranted items went away, it's going to take away a whole set of problems, and it's going to be a whole new set of issues. And I think Dell's right. You know, the Binzer has become probably more of a battle between buyer and seller than price.
Yeah.
I think we're all experiencing it.
Oh, yeah.
We're all experiencing it. Fix the hinge. Fix the drip on the water spigot. You know, it needs a 5-cent orange O-ring. I mean, we're seeing more and more of that, but this is now becoming the issues.
And Del, you said something at lunch yesterday about negotiations to your sellers, like when you're starting.
So I prepare my sellers for 3 sets of negotiations: the initial, the Benzer, and the appraisal. And you need to set up your sellers that way. And any one of those 3 that go wrong can kink your deal. And so, don't go out and buy a rent or buy another house, right? Or, contingent, right? But don't run out and get a storage unit and commit to $10,000 on a trip the day before close of escrow, because it ain't gonna happen. It should happen, but prepare for the worst, because it's wicked out there. And Don, I know you're big on this. On buyer's agency, man, buyer's agents, really, they're doing the general inspection, a roofing inspection, an electrical inspection, an HVAC inspection, and a window inspection. Ha! And the sellers are just looking at you like, what? And
Yeah.
it's
So
crazy.
listen to this, here's the other discussion. So listen to this, just think about this now. You do an inspection, and on the pool, it says there's a leak in the pool pump. The buyer puts it on the bins, seller says, sure, I'll fix it, and the seller fixes it. Now buyer does the walkthrough, and they discover on the pool, they fixed the leak that they agreed to, but there was another leak on another pump, let's say a second pump, there was a leak. So the buyer does the walkthrough and puts on the walkthrough to cure the second leak that they found. Would we agree that the seller's responsible for that?
It has to be in the same conditions it was purchased.
Okay, so we would agree that if it wasn't determined that there was 2 leaks, just one, and they fixed the one leak, and now something else is leaking on the pool, the seller would still be responsible. Could we agree on that because the house was not in substantially the same condition?
Correct.
Right, if you take the same scenario and say,
Well, by the way, you're getting mixed reviews in here. Everybody's not saying yes.
all right, if the inspection said there's 2 leaks, and the buyer only has to fix one, then that's the seller's obligation. So now they do a walkthrough, and there's still that other leak that was disclosed but wasn't asked to repair. The seller is not required to fix that second leak. Could we agree on that?
Yes.
Okay. Same scenario. There's 1 leak in the pool on the inspection. Buyer now does the walkthrough, and that leak was fixed, but they discovered another leak on the pool pump. Okay? The question is the seller now liable to fix that second leak?
Yes.
We can all agree on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I want to change the words a little bit, okay? So the buyer doesn't do a walkthrough for the pool. He does a pool inspection. He's not calling it a final walkthrough, he's calling it a pool inspection. And on the pool inspection, which we would call the walkthrough, they discovered the leak that was determined was fixed, but they found another leak, okay? Same scenario, but rather than calling it a walkthrough, we're calling it an inspection. And the buyer says on the walkthrough, 3-day notice of cure to fix that leak. Is the seller required to fix it? Why?
Inspection period's over.
See, I disagree. It's still not in the same condition. Nothing changed. You call it whatever you want, it's still not in the same condition.
It doesn't make no difference how it's
Because a
discovered.
walkthrough really kind of is an inspection. We just
It
call it
doesn't
a
make no
walkthrough.
difference how it was discovered. A leak is a leak.
We are on the same page on this one?
No.
No, we said no. Okay, go ahead.
It's an inspection. So what you're.
Well, you shouldn't call it
effectively
inspection.
saying is, there's no such thing as a 10-day inspection.
All right, hold
When
on.
you use that word inspection,
Yeah.
you were saying there's no such thing as a 10-day inspection.
I agree, but here's the thing. So if I don't call it an inspection, I call it a walkthrough, what changes?
It's not an inspection.
Okay, so you're saying it's a wording thing, it's a verbiage thing. Okay, fair enough.
It's a
And that's, and that's the point of this whole
It's a
discussion.
re-inspect.
It's-
we're not the same re-inspection.
Well, but the re-inspection is part of a walkthrough,
Right.
right? That really, whether we do a re-inspection with a company or not, a walkthrough is really just we are verifying the agreed repairs were made, we're verifying that the house is substantially the same condition. So whether we call it a walkthrough or inspection,
Right.
now it's just a play on words.
Correct.
But in this scenario, that second leak, if it was discovered at the walkthrough or the re-inspection, I still think the seller's responsible for that leak.
Correct.
Good, Scott.
What if, on the appraisal, a repair was required? And
On
then
the
as a
appraisal?
lender, yeah, the appraiser requires a repair.
Okay.
And as a lender, we send him out for the final to prove that the got fixed, and he sees something else new and calls for that.
Well, I think it's different, because that's a lender-required repair. It's not a Binzer buyer-seller issue. This now becomes a lender-required, that's only
You
on
will not go
VA,
through.
really, right? But it's a lender-required repair, and I think it's outside the scope
Correct.
of the 10-day inspection period,
Correct.
right? It's two different issues. Yeah.
We would not have a lot of these issues if we, as a group, did pre-inspections when we lived in a house.
Potentially.
And
Yeah, then you have disclosure
this is
issue.
so common in California, and
welcome.
I'd love to see
I have to disclose
us do
everything.
more of that, because we just don't have all these issues.
No, I don't agree with
I do have a question for you on that though, because I did a lot of corporate relocation in Colorado and they would always pre-inspect.
that. Correct.
But I would say probably less than 20% of the buyers were comfortable accepting that inspection, but
They wonder
because
why.
for some reason they thought it was, in the best interest or
Right,
something.
they can have their own inspection, but anything big's gonna come up.
That's a great point, yeah.
Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, I mean, you get in a real awkward position if you, want to try to convince a buyer to take your inspection. I mean, that's a real bad road to go down.
Oh, yeah.
I think we get pre-inspections done so that my seller can fix things that are really obvious to the next inspector.
Exactly.
And that's the only reason. And
Right.
we're happy to turn over the inspection because the contract
If
says
they
that.
ask.
Yeah, if they ask, we'll give it to them. But, I mean, to try to convince a buyer to rely on an inspection the seller did,
Not a good idea.
bad idea.
So, yeah, go ahead, Sharon.
We do have instances, however, where the buyer wants to, from our perspective, our agreement, our inspection agreement, the payment was all through the seller. So in that instance, with the pre-listing, the seller's our client, the new buyer is not, the court's not transferable. So in quite a few occasions, it happens more times than not, if the buyer already, either through the buyer agent or on their own, knew that we were doing the inspection, we do have a lot of instances where the buyer just was going to accept the report. We know there was a pre-listing, but no one else has revealed it. And it's an interesting dilemma for us, and it's always interesting to hear all of your takes on it, but we don't automatically reveal that someone else had already done the inspection. It's not our responsibility. It would be to disclose that. It would be us breaching the confidentiality of the initial buyer.
Well, the bigger issue for us comes in this, and we've all had this issue.
Disclosure is the issue.
You had the seller, you're in escrow, the buyer does an inspection, for whatever reason they cancel based on the inspection, and seller now sells the house, puts it back on the market. Second buyer comes along and says to the seller, have you ever had an inspection before? Seller says yes. Buyer says, would you share that inspection with me? Seller is not obligated to share that inspection.
Correct.
However,
Raises suspicion.
yeah, the seller must disclose any new material matters that were discovered. We went through this with the banking days, we all know it was never done, right? The buyer buys the house from the bank and they do an inspection and the air conditioner is missing. Buyer says, seller, fix it, and the bank says, no, I'm not doing it. Buyer walks away. Next contract comes in, and the bank now knows. The bank probably did not know the first time around, but they know the second time around, and they never disclosed. And that's wrong. And you know who else is wrong? The listing agent, because we knew, and we have an obligation to disclose. And here's what we do as agents, and that's, again, not just us, but as a community. Here's what we do. Hey, that was between buyer and seller. I didn't really look at the report. Buyer just said they weren't happy. Seller said they're not fixing it. I never read the report. Can't blame me. Not good enough. We are on the hook. We're the listing agent. We are on the hook. So then the question becomes, what's a material matter? What is on that report that the first buyer canceled that the seller should disclose? And the first page of our SPUD says, when in doubt, disclose. The mere fact that you're asking the question, do you think I should disclose the fact that there was a leak here, or there was a potential leak there, or just the fact that you're answering the question raises doubt?
I think a good rule of thumb is, let's say you were in escrow with deal one. They get through the inspection, and you get an inspection report, and you go back into escrow on deal two, I would highly suggest you tell your seller to share that inspection.
To do what, I'm sorry?
I would highly suggest that you tell the seller to share the inspection from deal one.
And they could, they're not obligated, but you're
Sandy?
right, that there's nothing wrong with that.
I don't mind sharing the inspection, but what we do is we have some verbiage that says that we want you to acknowledge, the buyer's agent and the buyer, that we're not making any representations according to the accuracy of the inspection we're sharing, and you're on your own. It's for informational purposes only, and we're not obligated to anything. You know, I forget what
Well,
the
just
verbiage
there's
was.
also a time difference.
That's a great start
There's
too.
also a time difference between when that inspection was done for the first
Sure.
buyer and
Sure.
when the second buyer came along. It could be a
Right.
week, it could be a month, and Sharon, in a week's time, anything can happen. Right?
We've all had it in
I'm
our
sorry.
lives.
Sandy's Larry.
Hi, yeah, please.
And the attorneys that I've worked with regarding, and I agree with Don, that said if you're going to share a previous inspection, you do it with a caveat. And the caveat says that you are sharing it as a courtesy only. that you advise the buyer to go get their own home inspection or to have the, whoever did the first one, okay, upgrade. But it says a courtesy only and that you're not held liable.
So here's another ongoing issue. And Shannon, I'm gonna pick on you because you're the inspector of the group. So, one window in the north bedroom is fogged, possible seal, blah, blah, blah. Recommend further evaluation by a licensed window guy for everything else, right? So the buyer goes on the Binzer and says, fix item 26 because it's the broken window, and have seller further evaluate all the other windows and ensure that all the other windows are, airtight. Wrong. I hate when I get those, and we all do it, and we all get them, and it makes me crazy. The buyer needs to do the further evaluation. You cannot ask the seller to, that's like saying to the seller, do a home inspection and fix all the items that are bad. It's the buyer's job to do all the further evaluations and determine what they disapprove and put on the Binzer. And we do it over and over again, and we get ourselves into trouble. Because then the seller says, sure, I'll do it. Well, is the seller supposed to do it or doesn't do it? And is he going to do it?
And is he liable for it?
It's a mess. It's just a mess. So if you're going to get that, or here's the other one. We've talked about this 100 times, and we still see it too, right? Whatever. The electrical items to be fixed by a licensed electrician. It's 4 GFIs that are broken. It needs to be done by a licensed electrician. Well, if you're going to put it in the Binzer, which is wrong to begin with, but like Dax told us and Rick Mack told us, if you're going to put it in the Binzer and the seller agrees to it, then it needs to be done by a licensed contractor because it's an agreement. Whether it changes the terms of the contract or not, there's a written agreement between buyer and sellers, a meeting of the minds, there's an understanding of how this is going to be fixed. However, if the seller responds back and says, I'll fix the GFIs and it'll be done by a qualified contractor or in a workmanlike manner, like the contract says, then that overrides the licensed contractor. If the seller agrees to a licensed contractor, you got to do it, even if it's just a simple GFI or a water spigot, hose bib or something.
So if you get the Binzer and you're the listing agent and they are requesting that the seller do that inspection, say the windows, okay, so the buyer's inspection period is over, how would you handle it?
Say that one more time. Oh, if they ask to further evaluate?
The Binzer is asking, say that window example.
Right, fix the window and further evaluate.
Yes, and so now their inspection period is over. So how would you handle
It depends. I don't know. I don't know the answer. We have one going on right now, and we just don't know how this is going to play out. It closed escrow. It was not under further evaluation. The buyer closed the deal thinking that there's going to be a further evaluation, and he thinks if he finds broken more windows, he's going after the seller. Nobody really knows.
Windows have become a very messy deal.
I would suggest this. You talk about doing a pre-inspection on the listing. I suggest that every seller get their windows professionally cleaned.
Yes, thank you.
You know what? That eliminate dirt, fog, buildup.
It's ridiculous. I mean,
Clean your windows, and I think that would solve, not all of it, I think that would solve a lot of
Because
problems.
the biggest challenge with windows is whenever you're looking at them, it depends on the time of day and it depends on the time of year. It actually, you could go look at a window and start to see some fogging or broken seal in the morning because the light's coming in a certain way, and then you come back an hour later to show it to somebody else and you can't find it. And I'm sure many of you have seen that happen. And then certainly a lot of the fogging and a lot of the change comes during monsoon season when everything contracts and convects and whatever the heck it does. But it's like I know what happened in my own house where your doors start sticking more with the humidity or your windows. So a lot of those things happen during that time of year.
Yeah, I mean, to Dell's point, we negotiate not 503, not 49. We've agreed on a $500,000 price. That's stoned. But a fogging window, is it fogged or is it dirt? Or further evaluate, or is the second leak the first leak? Is it a walkthrough or is it a reinspection? The Binzer is becoming much, much more than the purchase price on negotiations. All right, we have time for one more question. I see this a lot, and you can substitute the word guest house for anything you want. You can close patio in an Arizona room and add on. Just use that word for anything else. In the listing and the contract, the seller is selling a home with a guest house in the backyard. after the inspection and just prior to close of escrow, the seller and the buyer learned that the guest house, the enclosed patio, just fill in the blank, which was a modified trailer, violates the building code and cannot be used as a living area. Although the inspection period is expired, can the buyer cancel the contract? So basically, you've all experienced this. You've learned after the inspection period, during the escrow process, somehow a room wasn't permitted, or the additional square footage wasn't done by a licensed contractor, or the guest house wasn't done properly, or it's not meeting code. Fill in the blank, we've all experienced this. The question becomes, can the buyer cancel the contract after the inspection period?
Yes.
That's upon the SPUDs, potentially. If it was discussed in the SPUDs that says guest house was not built to code, was not licensed, was not permitted, and he was put on notice, good question, probably not. Probably not. I can't see. Brian, yes?
Under the Arizona contract, the buyer can cancel a contract if they determine anything that adversely affects their use of the property prior to closing. That's they discover on the way to the closing that a sex offender lives across the street.
All within their inspection timeframes, number one. Number one, it has to be within their prescribed timeframes, number one. Number two, and I'll use your example in this case, if a buyer discovers something like that after closing house, because remember, a buyer or seller just can't cancel the contract. You always have to do a 3-day cure. You just can't just say, I'm done, I'm finished, I discovered a sex offender next door, I'm canceling. You can't do that. So whether it's a sex offender or a guest house, here's the procedure. The buyer has to, the buyer notifies the seller, the discovery. The seller is required to update the SPUDs because it's something new. They have to revise the SPUDs. Once it's revised, the buyer has 5 days then to cancel the contract and disapprove the SPUDs. That's the procedure of how it's done.
So let's run.
Can't do it, that's my
Well,
point.
not just arbitrarily, there's a process. There's a process.
Right, so let's run through this sequence. What you would do, you represented the buyer, you found out a sex offender's across the street. Amy's the selling agent. This is a bad example because we're in the same firm, but I'll use it anyway. Let's say she works with ABC Realty. I call Amy and say, Amy, we just found out a sex offender lives across the street. Can you please update the SPUDs? All right, now that's a trap. Watch it. Amy says, sure. Updates the SPUDs. I get it back with the new date on it. Cancel.
Okay.
Whoa.
All right, let's play one. Now ask me the same question. I'm Amy, ask me the same question. Watch how this plays out.
Hey Amy, Del Rounds, I just found out that there's a you work for ABC Realty. I just found out there's a sex offender across the street. Can you update the SPUDs?
Not doing it.
Why not?
Not doing it.
Did you know there was a sex offender across the street?
I didn't know, and this is hearsay. I'm not doing it.
Does the seller know?
I don't think so.
All right, I'm going to send you the website. Hang on, I'm going to send you the website I'm on right now, and I've advised the buyer. To get legal counsel. This was not disclosed.
But here's the answer I'm wrong with this.
Okay.
The fact that you knew, once the fact that you knew and you told me,
Yeah.
that's considered your 5 days. If I'm not willing to update the SPUDs, AR will say, the fact that all parties have been, it's been known to all parties,
Right.
your 5 days now begin.
Okay, so now, Brian,
Should that be in an email?
he's saying you're
Should be.
right in the right sequence of events. Okay,
Correct. That's
so
right.
so that's what I'd handle. So guys, throw around legal. Listen, when you get out of your here's just a thought, Sam. Sort of chime in. When you get out of your realm, right? I'll give you an example. The other day, I put up a sign, and this president of the homeowners association calls me. You can't put a sign up. I immediately said, okay, I'll have my legal counsel call you. Her name is Ellen Lawson. Thanks. Call Ellen. Ellen, call this guy. Within minutes, it's handled. So now.
Just remember, Sandy Carpenter is not your legal counsel.
I'm just throwing it out there, guys. I like throwing out that says, I've advised the buyer to get legal counsel. Because that's a weird deal, right? I mean, you don't want to be responsible for your buyer moving in with a 9-year-old with a sex offender next door that somebody missed.
Hold on. No.
Sex offender, the seller's not required to disclose.
That's what
right?
Oh, okay. So you just-
That's fair. I think your example is.
Somebody
died.
Not in Arizona.
What was the original example?
California, yes.
Anyway, The point was, Brian, and Dell's right, you can, but there's a procedure and a process you have to go through. You just can't cancel the deal. You always have to give, the non-breaching party always has to give the non-breaching party a chance to remedy, or the breaching party a chance to remedy. Does that make sense? The non-breaching party always has to give the breaching party a chance to remedy. And sometimes that remedy is a disclosure,
Yeah.
or sometimes it's actual physical, process.
Jill wants to add something.
I think we should make it very clear on the sex offender, the disclosure, whether the seller discloses the seller, because I think people could get confused right now after this past discussion, that could be used.
Well, that's fair, and the sex offender has to be done during the inspection period. I mean, if it's discovered after the fact and nothing's changed, that's the difference. But listen, everything has a twist and turn. So what happens after the inspection period? I do my due diligence, there's no sex offenders, I'm satisfied on the websites, right? I'm satisfied, and it's a 2-month close of escrow, and in that 2 months, now a sex offender moves into the neighborhood. Well, then I think your scenario comes into play where you're asking the seller to redisclose.
No.
Nope.
I don't write the law.
disclosure requirement.
Just a second. Part B of the stigmatized property law says discovery after the contract is not grounds for rescission of the contract. So that's why all the document says you must do all your investigations during the inspection period. So if a sex offender moves in after the inspection period, they can cancel the contract, but they're not going to get their earnest money back.
Well, that's a tough one. You know what, you pick a side, we'll fight that one.
Yeah.
Because
That's fine.
I know.
Because it's funny, as I look at
can get
you,
one.
there's an attorney right behind you,
I know.
and I see him,
Yeah.
adversely affects the price, so whatever, right? You're gonna run into these no answer deals, and that's why there's E&O insurance, hopefully. And-
I know. Anyway.
That they don't want a sex offender in the neighborhood. Shouldn't they do their due diligence beforehand?
Absolutely, absolutely. And never, ever, ever be the source of that information.
Right.
Tell them where to go, tell them where to find it, tell them who to call, give them Larry Hibbler's phone number. You're not the ones to say there's no sex offenders.
No, I love
Or
these.
there is.
I love these meetings where I got Sandy, Larry, and look, you can see these two in the back debating. It's awesome.
One last thing. What do you guys want to see in our meetings? What kind of guest speakers do you want to see? What kind of topics? We got a whole slew of what we think we want. But if you guys have any ideas, tell Del or Greg.
Just send them to me.
Tell us what
If you
you
have
want.
certain ideas or
You want a
certain
tax accountant
people.
as the year's ending? You want somebody from the city officials? Do you want a city planner?
We're working on an estate
Lawyers.
planner right now, so.
Yeah, so whatever you guys think you want to see or suggestions, please.
I would suggest a tax, because there's a new rule about rentals that is very favorable to landlords.
Tax.
Oh, tax,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Bill Gray just talked about that in our last CE.
So just let us know and we'll get those kind of guest
Yeah,
speakers.
and for the month of November, just so you guys know, I have a DR Horton rep coming in to talk about Paradise Ridge at 65th Street and Mayo. I'll send out, I got some preliminary information the other day about lot sizes. Looks like they're gonna have 3 neighborhoods there. No pricing yet, but that's gonna be really hot for this office. Paradise Ridge, just west of Lifetime Fitness on Mayo at about 67th Street. It's 200 acres, I believe. So they'll be here in the month of November. Yep.
Right, perfect. So, like we do every meeting, we have our opportunity to say thank you to all of our vendors. We're going to have them stand up and say a little bit. So, go ahead. You're going to start over here with Fidelity.
I'll be nice and short. Good morning, John. Fidelity National Title. And we have Jen Waller and Courtney as well in the back.
Tara.
Tara Carter, Old Republic Home Protection. The 2018 calendars are out, so if you would like one, stop by on your way out.
Jackie.
Jackie Whitney, Security Title. We've got a class tomorrow at SAR on Instagram for real estate. It starts at 10 o'clock, so if you want to join us, let me know. Thanks.
Thank you. Emily? Oh, sorry.
Hi.
Deanne back in the back.
Deanne with Gazing Realty Media. We are running a special. I just hired on several new luxury photographers, so
really want to get your properties enhanced with Twilight Photography, so I'm giving 10% off. That's over a $30 value. I also just brought on a video photographer. Awesome. I mean, he has a drone that flies right into the house. It's very cool. Starting around $300, full editing, voiceover, and music. So check us out.
Thanks, Tiffany.
Hi, Tiffany from CNN Mortgage. I just want to bring up something interesting that I read this morning on Bloomberg. Donald Trump is looking for possibly a new Fed chairman. The new Fed chairman that he's looking at that has impressed him, his name is Taylor. Last name's Taylor. And the Taylor effect is what they call it. The Taylor effect is when gold and when the dollar goes up, like it's going up now, rates will get a lot worse, is exactly the words. So just be careful on that and watch that.
Good morning, Rebecca Wiesink with Allstate Insurance. If I can help you or your clients with anything insurance related, please call. Thanks.
Thank you. Jill?
Good morning, Jill Wright, Chicago Title. CE class on Thursday. If you guys need any hours, let me know.
Sharon?
Sharon Wolf Herman, your home, commercial, and termite inspectors from AJF Engineering Inspections. Thank you all.
Good morning, Julie LaRosa, Stewart Title. We have a CE class following this class immediately, so please stay if you need Code of Ethics. And then I wanted to thank Jill and Wendy. The three of us were part of a crew that helped build a home in Tempe for Give Back Home. So, boy, did we look good swinging those hammers.
Wendy.
Tool belts never look so good. Wendy Cracchiolo, business developer and downsizing coordinator for Get Your Move On. Glad to be here. Thanks everybody for your support.
Thank you.
Lead gen, referral, any of that kind of stuff on the marketing side of our business that you would like some direction on. Any subject matter across there, SOI, referrals, anything. Okay? All right, so I'll tell you something I'm doing. Did somebody, no? All right, so I'll tell you something. What do you got?
No, I just thought it was interesting how nobody asked.
Well, because I think we're in a 400 level and everybody has their impressions of what their model looks like by now. So it's not a $2 million like experience. You know, we're usually up above that in general. You know, RE/MAX agents are usually $3 million and above. So I think that's the reason for that.
And you do your weekly class.
All right. Yeah. So let me throw out something that I'm having some pretty good success with. So what I'm doing is going around all my successful closes, either buyer or seller related. Okay, so envision. Name a house you just closed, Amy.
I'm closing one this week.
Okay, great. Where?
In Surprise.
Okay, in Surprise. Okay. Do you want to work Surprise? Okay. Okay, so that's my first question. Because you only want to do this on a marketplace. 'Cause I sell homes in Phoenix, in places that,
You know what?
Okay.
2828 East Corinne.
Okay, 2828 East Corinne. So I know that house. All
Yeah,
right.
that's why I said it.
All right. Great house because it's 225 and the neighborhood is moving. The neighborhood is popping. It's 225. There was 4 offers on this house. We had a first-time home buyer. It was an estate sale. I took a picture of the buyer at the front, in front of the house, sent it to the seller. I mean, I really worked this deal. We ended up going $3,000 over list price, and Marianne and I were successful. Okay, so that's a good example. That's the deal. Buyer's name is John Jones. All right. Call Pam Bay. All right, she has access to a database that's pretty phenomenal. I'm going to give her a quick testimonial. Kelly, is Pam Bay's numbers generally good?
99%.
99%. All right, now Natalie will tell you it's about 75%. Good. All right, so all the numbers aren't going to be great. She can also give you email addresses. All right, so here's how it goes. Here's how it goes. You're the neighbor to John Jones on Corinne. You're the neighbor on this side. All right, who wants to role play with me? No, I want somebody. Linda.
Sounds kind of personal.
Ring, ring.
I'll do it.
Are you assistant?
Hi.
Linda, because you know their name off tax records, Del Rounds with RE/MAX Fine Properties. I'd like to introduce you to your new neighbor.
Oh. Well,
You know the house next door is for sale.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, so John Jones is moving in. He works for Unison Bank. Great guy. He's single. I don't know why I say that. But I generally say something about the house. I think he's married, has a dog, you know, very nice kid. He's a first-time home buyer, right? First-time home buyer.
If you say so.
He closes tomorrow. He closes tomorrow.
Okay.
And I was calling to see if you'd like an evaluation on your home.
No, I don't want an evaluation on my home.
Okay.
I'm not planning to go anywhere till I die.
Oh, pretty happy there.
Yeah.
Well, if you were to move, where would you move to?
Oh, wow.
If you were to move, where would you move to?
Sun City.
Sun City. Sun City. When would you like to be there, Linda? Sun City. He answered for you. Sun City. When would you like to be there?
In about maybe 10 years.
Wonderful. What's your email address?
I'm not giving you my, I don't know who I'm talking to.
Oh, well, I'm the guy who represented the buyer next door, Del Rounds. You can Google me. What's your email address? I'll send you homes in Sun City.
I'm not giving you my email.
Okay.
I don't trust people that just call out of the blue and don't know me.
Okay, so Google me and I'll call you back tomorrow. But one of the things I wanted to note for you is the house next door sold for a really good option. Any other rumblings in the neighborhood like the Andersons that are moving away, that have somebody else that might be selling in the neighborhood?
Well, the Zeman house may be up for sale down the street. They're on the corner. I heard rumors, but I don't know.
The Siemens, terrific. Are they on your side of the street or the opposite side?
No, on my side.
Your side on the corner. Okay, the
Yeah.
Siemens. Well, thank you for that. Do you have any other real estate assets that you own that you would like me to do an evaluation on?
No, thank you. But I still say I don't know you from Adam, and I want to have this conversation. Thank you for calling.
Okay, Linda, thanks for taking my call. I'll keep in touch. So next time I'll be all right, and then boom, right? So guys, she can give you, you know, in every neighborhood, there's like hundreds of these, and they're an easy, Frank, you've heard me make these calls. They're an easy phone call. They're not expireds, they're not canceled, and everybody wants to know who's moving into the neighborhood, right? They're good. So go ahead, comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, but it's all right. No comment. All right, all right.
Thank you.
So yeah, my goal is to make lead generation a priority for this company because one thing that we see successful in selling houses, you're usually looking elsewhere or different industries. So there's only 4 things that we do. There's only 4 things that we do, and if there's anything from coming to these meetings, you guys will get this. What's the first thing we got to do? Lead gen. Then what?
Follow up.
Lead follow up. Then what?
Negotiate.
Then what?
Present.
And you can't do the last 2 if you don't do the first 2. So and these are easy calls. So anyway, there's my tips from the top. So so hopefully when you sell one in Cave Creek, which is where you live, Amy, that's when you really want to network that and introduce them to neighbors because people want to know. He's got a dog named Toto. He went to Stanford. He's engaged. His fiance's moving in. You might be invited to the wedding. Yeah.
So if you represented the
Seller?
the seller,
Okay.
and you don't know all the information about the buyer, would you do it anyways?
Yeah, so I call the buyer's agent, try to get intel. I call the buyer's agent and try to get intel. Some of the neighbors, so it goes like this. So you're the buyer's agent. Hey, the Andersons, they're buying Corinne. Neighbors are starting to ask who's moving in. Does he have any kids? Am I stepping on some RESPA stuff?
You might personal confidential information to the buyer. You probably should ask the buyer first if it's all right.
Okay, all right. So can you, buyer's agent, right? Can you call the buyer, neighbors are asking, and ask your buyer if he would like some of the neighbors to know who's moving in? And then take it that way. I usually will tell some things, so I don't ask permission, but I agree with you, Larry. I'm always doing something that's kind of.
You don't need both, so I understand that.
Yeah, so I would say, you know, if I met the two kids and I know he's got a dog named Toto and I know he works for American Express, I would use stuff like that. So the new buyer moving in works for American Express. His wife's name is Jan. He's got 2 teenage girls that are 14. When would you like a market evaluation on your house, rumblings in the neighborhood, and anything else you own that you would like me to research? You've got to get those 3 things in. All right, guys, that's it.
Yeah. All right. If, ladies and gentlemen, if you did not sign up for the class afterwards, but you still want to stay, that is perfectly okay. So just if you have trash, go ahead and throw it away. Otherwise, thank you again for coming,
Yeah, thanks
and
for
we'll
coming.
see you next month.